Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast. I'm Terry, the creator and co-host of this podcast. I've lived with depression most of my life, and I know how easy it can be to feel all alone in the experience. I'm not alone, and you aren't either.
And I'm Dr. Anita Sands, a licensed clinical psychologist with a number of my own diagnoses, all of which bring a certain amount of anxiety and depression along with them. There is great power in shared experiences. We share our own as we engage in intimate and candid conversations with our weekly guests, exploring different perspectives on and experiences with depression.
We keep it real because depression is real. We keep it hopeful because there truly is hope, in spite of what depression tells you.
Hi, Terry.
Hello, Anita. So we would like to acknowledge our new partnership with Recovery.com, which will allow us to continue producing our podcast and creating our daily mental health social media posts. Recovery.com provides resources and information for individuals seeking treatment for mental health or addiction issues. It offers a fact-checked and vetted online platform of treatment centers to help individuals find the right path to recovery. Today's episode is a continuation of our look at postpartum depression, or PPD, produced in partnership with Families for Depression Awareness and made possible by a sponsorship from Sage Therapeutics and Biogen. The information here will not just be useful and of interest to new mothers, but also for anyone who wants to better understand and support someone struggling during what is supposed to be one of the happiest times in life.
According to the Harvard Health blog, the causes of postpartum depression are not fully understood. It's thought that the abrupt decrease in hormone levels after having a baby can lead to the development of PPD in susceptible mothers. Quoting Harvard Health, the strongest predictor of postpartum depression is a personal history of a mood disorder or anxiety, especially if present and untreated during pregnancy. In fact, women with a history of depression during pregnancy are 7 times more likely to experience significant postpartum depression. Our return guest, Natasha, falls in that category, but she didn't realize it because she'd never been diagnosed with depression before becoming a mother. Although you will hear us discuss moms and motherhood in this podcast, we acknowledge that birthing people could be trans or non-binary. Here again is Natasha giving her voice to depression.
Our son, Osiris, was born November 2018. And after, we worked with a doula during my pregnancy. She came in about the second trimester. And through her, me and my husband were educated about a lot, the baby blues, what it feels like, what to look for, postpartum depression. So when she was educating me, she was also educating my husband on just because sometimes you don't realize that you're going through that. And so just in case you don't, your partner will know to check in on you and be able to see those signs.
Yet even with that education, when postpartum depression descended, like many, neither Natasha nor her husband were able to immediately recognize it. In part because it arrives all tangled in other changes.
It was very little regard for this life change that had just taken place and getting used to being home. I also grew up extremely independent. Even when I met my husband throughout the dating and even before we got pregnant, I always worked, made my own money, but now I'm a stay-at-home mom. It was so many life changes happening back to back all at once. But yeah, the biggest part was the fear that I'm not doing something right, or that fear that I would take on or show some of those negative traits that I saw from my own mom and grandmother and stuff growing up. I was more so focused on making sure I didn't transfer that over.
Yeah.
And what also just didn't help that was, as I was surrounded by a lot of people that were either not mothers, or if they are parents, their fathers who were more so working, not at home. So they didn't really understand where I was coming from. It was people who wanted me to jump back into projects right away.
The impact on Natasha's mental health went beyond PPD.
in addition to that, I noticed that my anxiety levels increased after I gave birth. And then I learned from other moms who I know who also dealt with anxiety. They said that was normal, that it gets a little bit worse after you have children.
How long was there between when you think you started experiencing symptoms and saying, hey, I think I have postpartum depression?
Over a span of like 4 months.
So from the beginning, you think you had the symptoms, okay?
Yeah.
And they worsened or just got to a boiling point?
I would say they got to a boiling point.
Okay.
Because then I was so used to repressing things, sweeping them under the rug. You know, that's just like the family I came from. You didn't really address much. So and like I said, I felt that me feeling that way was me being ungrateful for this new blessing and being weak, you know, even though I know now that that wasn't a sign of weakness, but just in regards to how I grew up and things like that, I just saw it as a sign of weakness, being depressed and feeling sad, especially when I just couldn't really pinpoint a reason for it. So I just kept internalizing it and telling myself, no, that's not really what you're feeling. You have so much to be happy about, but repressing that just made it worse.
So I have to ask if there's any other illness that if you had gotten it during your early months of being a new mother, you would have said, oh, I shouldn't have whatever, the flu, because I have so much to be grateful for.
Yes, because I'm like, oh, I need some medicine. I need to get some treatment. Like,
right?
Feeling sick. Yeah, so when you put it like that, it's wild. But yeah, I would have right away sought some kind of treatment to fix those symptoms. But with this, it was like, no, I'm not going to tell anyone. Even my husband was always checking in with me, and I was just lie all the time. I'm fine, I'm doing good.
Did you think that if you told him earlier, he would have been disappointed in you if you were viewing it as a personal weakness?
Not at all, actually.
Okay.
Not given just how supportive he is. I think he just would have been more. He would have told me definitely to reach out to our doula firsthand right away.
Mm-hmm. So then why didn't you?
I felt I didn't understand the emotions. It was me fighting with myself, me repressing it, and then focusing on, okay, you have a healthy baby, you have a great marriage, focus on that. And so just escaping, like just pushing those feelings as far back as I could and just focusing, because then also, okay, I gotta make sure my baby's okay. So I had a lot to keep me busy to help repress what I was feeling.
Mm-hmm. I remember almost a sense of embarrassment too, right? Where you're like, I just don't want to say this. I just don't want to say this. Like, this will pass. I've got this. Tomorrow will be different.
Exactly. And really not knowing the right words, or like, okay, how do I even verbalize what I'm feeling? Because I'm confused. Like, I got all these mixed of emotions and thoughts running through my head. And so it was just trying to, okay, I want to, because my husband, he'll ask me and I want to say something. I'm like, no, you're overreacting. Just forget it. And then switch the conversation to something else.
After uncharacteristically losing her temper with her husband and then sobbing uncontrollably, Natasha told both her husband and doula that she thought she was suffering from postpartum depression. Talk therapy was recommended, something no one in Natasha's family had ever tried. So once you told your doula, told your husband, started therapy, what changed? How did anything change for you?
My mood, like I felt starting therapy, and I remember when I started therapy, like she gave a lot of disclaimers and just saying, like, how therapy can be challenging for some people, especially if like we get to talking about like family situations or like how parents may have influenced something. Like a lot of times people become combative, or they just quit therapy altogether. She gave me like a whole list of disclaimers right away. But I'm going in, even though I was excited to seek some kind of help, to have an outlet to finally like talk to somebody, at the same time I didn't know really what to expect. So I had a little bit of anxiety starting, but once we got going, I felt such a sense of relief. Like I would go home and share some things with my husband. I just felt more relaxed. I felt more optimistic about things. And then I started to realize, okay, what you're feeling, like, there's reasons behind what you're feeling, like, and you can deal with this. It's okay. And you're not by yourself. You're not the only mother dealing with this. Because then too, also, I felt it's crazy, but also felt alone, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's part of why we're doing this, obviously, because another mother listening to this is going to hear your story and feel less alone. So let me pivot there and say, what have you learned from your experience that could have saved you some time, some anxiety, some all kinds of the things you were feeling if you'd known them earlier?
That one is, it's not a sign of weakness to feel that way, that more people than, especially more women than you realize, deal with that. And if you have someone around you that you can trust, tell them. Don't hold it in. Talk to someone sooner than later, because what you don't want is all of that to fester. So when you get to a point where it boils over, because you realize that every woman has different levels of postpartum depression. Everyone deals with things differently. And most times she might not even realize she's dealing with postpartum depression until, in some cases, unfortunately, it becomes too late. So I say definitely, you're not weak. Talk to someone as soon as you can. And don't be ashamed to seek out therapy or counseling, because that's something I grew up with. Like, there was a saying, like, we don't talk about what goes on in this home, or, you know, and I grew up in a Baptist home. You go to church and you pray, and that's fine. If that's your belief, it's fine to pray. But even in the Bible, it says faith without works is dead. You pray and then you go seek help. You talk to someone so you can heal.
I had one guest say, that she was raised with that same sort of belief system. And she said, and I pray on my way to my therapist. And I just loved that, right? It was like, oh, I get that. We need what we need. And, sometimes whatever the tool is, whether it's faith, whether it's meds, whether it's therapy, whether it's yoga, whether it's journaling, it's seldom one thing with which we can manage an illness. It's a complicated thing.
Yeah, and that's, with me, I grew up loving to read and write. And I hadn't wrote anything in a long time. Life happens, you're working, you're paying bills and all that. But going to therapy helped open that door back up for me to get into creative writing. So for me, creative writing is a major form of therapy for me. I love to write, and music, and listening to music and exercising. Those are all things, too, I do to help just manage and help build up those levels of serotonin naturally,
So when you talk about telling someone, and that sort of being the message for mothers, what about for the support people? What about for the partners? What about for friends and other people who might be able to help? What's the advice for them if someone as articulate, aware as you are is going to say, I'm fine? So how do you get past I'm fine if someone isn't?
I would say, I think, for example, my husband, he's great. He's a great support system, but he doesn't he won't rock the boat. He won't really push. So if you tell him you're fine, he might say, are you sure? But then he'll drop it, And I would say, if you're the support system, if you notice that there are certain behaviors, there are certain tones, because a woman who's dealing with postpartum depression, a lot of times you'll be able to notice some changes in her behavior, changes in her activity, changes maybe in how she's dealing with her baby. It's okay to probe a little bit further, to just make sure, dig a little deeper and make sure that she truly is okay.
So if I am supporting you during that time and I say, wow, I'm noticing a whole lot of changes here, but of course there are changes. You've just quit your job, you're exhausted, you've just, had a baby, all of it. And you tell me you're fine. I don't really know where to go from there because I don't want to piss you off.
Yeah, true.
So I'd love to dig into this a little because there isn't some secret language for it.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to figure out if I'm with someone and I say, hey, you just seem off. And it's like, well, of course I'm off. I'm exhausted. I haven't slept. I've taken care of this baby all day. I'm pumping. I'm hormonal. I'm all the things we are. How would you know?
I would say some persistent communication. That's one of the best ways I can think of it. And it's true, like depending in a person that's around, like your support, you will know their personality. And I get it. Sometimes some people can be a little bit more, and like combative is not the word that I want to use, but private, and it can be really hard to just get something in there. But if you are like truly a part of their support system, there is a comfort level to be able to have a conversation. There are ways to weave in those concerning questions. Like you mentioned before, hey, I noticed you're doing less of this or more of that, or I noticed this change. Because in the way that you communicate can open that door to where they feel comfortable, and they might end up just spilling a little bit more. Like actually then that way you might actually get it out of them that something is going on.
Good. Thank you. So if you have another child.
Oh, we're expecting.
Congratulations. That's neat. Yeah. Okay. So, and when is this child due?
September.
So if in September you have your second child and have similar experiences, what will you do differently?
Well, this time around, it's something I've been thinking about too since we learned that we are expecting. Is one, I'm more comfortable, especially being on my advocacy journey and just opening up and speaking. And just if I feel myself going back down that rabbit hole of feeling depressed, I know I can reach up and let my husband know, and also talk to a therapist, talk to a counselor. So now I won't be ashamed. And also I realized from what I went through after having our son that I am prone to depression. So now this time I will be proactive instead of reactive.
So Terry, there's so many good things in this episode. And, one of the things that I talk with my clients about when they're expecting is that postpartum depression can look and feel like a lot of different things. It can look and feel like depression. It can look and feel like severe anxiety. It can look and feel like obsessive compulsive disorder. And if you have a family history or a personal lived experience history of any of those things, or if when you as a woman have had severe PMS or ever been diagnosed with what they call PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, you really do need to be on the lookout then postpartum for an increase in any symptoms of depression, anxiety, or of thinking or compulsive behaviors. Because you will tend to see with major hormonal shifts, if you're susceptible to an increase in mental health symptoms, we're going to see that at puberty. We're going to see it during PMS time. We're going to see it postpartum, and we may also see it in perimenopause. So anytime we're experiencing really huge shifts in hormones, we can see mental health symptoms get worse. The other thing that I really loved that she talked about was, again, reiterating two things that we keep talking about on the podcast. One is reach out before it gets really bad, but then also balancing that with if you're a person with someone who could have possible postpartum depression, be that persistent questioner and that persistent communicator and not drop it just when the person says, yes, I'm fine, I'm okay. She had mentioned being persistent would have helped. Mm-hmm. Helped her to say, well, I'm not really okay. I'm not really fine.
Because I think it's fair to say and human to experience that we want to hear fine. When we ask someone how they are, we want to hear fine. Yeah. We want them to be fine. Mm-hmm. And they say there's no lie, I'll use that word, that you're more likely to believe than one you wish to be true. So even if it's what we asked, what they said, what we wanted to hear, we still have to say, okay, but I've noticed. Or, if you're not, it's okay to tell me, because a lot of people aren't. It's a very natural thing.
Yep.
Also, just want to go back to when Natasha said that there are support groups available for people who don't have natural supports in their own life. Even the best of our friends may not have the the skill set to be there for us in the ways we want. So it's worth searching wherever you are on social media or somewhere else to see, Giving Voice to Depression has a great community, but it is not new mother specific. So if you want to look up postpartum depression support or something, we encourage you to do that if you need it. So before we close out, we do have some bonus content, a caregiver tip to end this episode, courtesy of Families for Depression Awareness.
This episode's caregiver tip from Families for Depression Awareness is: educate yourself about the signs of postpartum depression before mom gives birth. Know what to look for so you are prepared to offer support. If you see mom crying excessively, withdrawing from loved ones, struggling to bond with the baby, displaying anger or irritability, or if mom talks about harming the baby or herself, it's time to reach out for professional help.
We truly hope that our podcast brings a little more understanding, helps you better articulate and reflect on your own experience with depression, or better understand how to support someone else who is struggling.
If this episode has been of comfort or value to you, know that there are hundreds of others like it in our archive, which you can easily find at our website, givingvoicetodepression.com. And remember, if you're struggling, speak up, even if it's hard. If someone else is struggling, take the time to listen.